and then tried to, to revamp the political party. And later on, he created his own party, the CTP, and he became prime minister, he became president, that one individual, and took the Pan-African struggle to the next level. I don't know if this is my pathway, but I know that I will go back to Ivory Coast with the people of Burkina Faso in this room, with whom we've been working, we're thinking about that framework, bringing together Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast. And if we do that, we will take the struggle to the next level. This is strategy number 5. That I can mention on TV or in public. Thank you.
Dr. Clark?
So in terms of strategies, I actually like that question. I mean, hip hop is my area, but I'm an activist who also happens to be, part of hip hop culture. So I think there's multiple ways, and we have to engage in multiple ways. So I get involved in conferences like this, the AAPRP, Revival for Pan-Africanism Forum. I think a lot of their strategies are political education. And so these conferences and work study groups really are about political education. And so taking part in that, in order for me to kind of, in terms of more street action, when I was in LA, I was heavily involved in Black Lives Matter LA, and we've seen in the news some of the strategies that they've used, and so that's another way. Black Lives Matter has also kind of reached out internationally. I know they were in Latin America and have worked with other groups, even though I wouldn't describe them necessarily as Pan-African. I've also done volunteer work with immigrant groups that visit immigrant detainees, and I specifically have asked to work with the African and Caribbean immigrants. Again, something that is tangible to say, I'm a part of this African community, this global African community, so here's a contribution. You have different programs. I know MBUF has a Feed the Hood program, getting involved in that. I worked with Amnesty International, absolutely not Pan-African, but I worked on their East Africa program. They have a lot of resources. They've got a lot of members, and so if I can say, look, there's a political prisoner in Uganda who's in prison because he's an LGBT activist, they've got hundreds of thousands of members globally that they can mobilize to write letters. And I've used that to get my own Pan-African agenda through. So I think that but I do all of these things simultaneously. You can't just do one. We've got groups here, Constituency for Africa. I'm not sure what's going on with Africare, but I know I interned with them years ago. Trans-Africa is not here anymore, but you have other groups that are here.
Trans-Africa's here.
But I think also if you're here in DC, you're in a very good location to engage with these organizations, intern with them, get involved in projects. If they're sending stuff to the continent, if they're, if people are coming here, engage and work with. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of money and it doesn't take a lot of effort, but you have to do political education, on the ground movement,
Aren't you
engagement.
missing the point? When he asked that question, I think you're missing the point. He's Constituency for Africa. He's taking people with financial economics in Africa. All you're doing is well and good, but how does that relate to what the question he asked?
In terms of engagement?
In terms of the economic aspect, he's talking about, I deal with people in the State Department every day. He's talking about they're buying up the land in Africa. All you're doing is well and good.
Okay.
But when the land is being sold to Europeans and Chinese, what you doing?
Okay, so I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
So if you want to look at policies, engage with groups on the ground in Africa, because there are groups that are dealing with the land issue. There are groups that are fighting their governments. In Tanzania, they wanted to build a road through the Serengeti so that capitalists could transport their goods. Groups got together, Tanzanians for first time in a long time, got together and said, oh hell no, and they shut it down. That is one thing you can also do.
Absolutely. Well, that's
yeah,
Dr. Clark. Absolutely. No, thank you, sir. Thank you for amplifying Melvin's question. And what Melvin is doing is he's guiding us towards strategic thinking. And that's a larger discussion that needs to take place. It has already started. One of the things as we draw near, we're not done. For those who are interested, if you'd like to start a contact list, again, someone could just start a contact list and put your name, your email, your contact information and share it with the group so that we can continue to share information amongst ourselves. That's one. What we'd like to do now, as we're drawing to a close, but we're not done, we want to take 2 more questions. I know the gentleman there, and there's a gentleman over here, a young lady here. And I want to ask the panelists if you would please answer the questions being sensitive to time. And then we're going to have a final remark, a minute and a half from each of our panelists, and then we'll thank them, and then we'll conclude our program. So let's start with, I think it was this gentleman. He was first, and then you. Final question, and then a final remark from each of our panelists. Introduce yourself, please.
How's everybody doing? My name is Jihad Muhammad. I'm a freshman finance major from St. Louis, Missouri. And my question today centered on how Pan-Africanism is it's like a run before you can crawl type of thing. And if you're trying to get like Africans in the American continent to join back on the front that they came from in Africa. And my question was, directed towards you, sir.
Who, Netfa or Dr. Gnaka?
Dr. Gnaka.
Okay.
Do you think that a strong sense of nationalism within the black community in Africa, the black community in America, is necessary, and that we need to first separate and make ourselves economically independent of this country before we can take that and bring it to Africa?
Excellent question. Dr. Gnaka.
I don't know. It's a great question. I think that it is not, the way I see things is not one after the other. I think that when we talk about Pan-Africanism and then that transnational nationalism, for me, it can be done simultaneously. And then, Macron did it. And then King, in the beginning, and later on, he had to focus on the civil rights struggle here. And there are many, Netfa can give many names of people who thought about doing that simultaneously. In other words, but I think that this can be done simultaneously. I still believe that the idea, the essence is about self-sufficiency and self-reliance. Even if tomorrow we have the nicest president that leading America in the White House, who cares so much about black people that he wants to play saxophone with them. I think that the black communities here, they have to understand that they have to have self-reliant and self-sufficient communities. That's the vision. And the same thing has to be done in Africa, and the same thing has to be done in the Caribbean. That's the idea.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Msia. I'm the current president of the Zimbabwe Africa Research Center. My question is about civil society, and as Msia had hinted at, the past 5 years in particular, the civil society organizations such as Pan-Africa, such as Africa, have disappeared or diminished. And the question going forward is a forward-looking way over the next 5 years leading up to 2020. What are some of the challenges in terms of catalyzing, getting back some of the civil society organizations, and in addition to that, connecting the civil society organizations in the diaspora with those on the continent? And Doctor, if you could speak, I was very inspired when you spoke about Ubuntu. So in addition to connecting the civil society organizations, if you can speak about changing the complexion or the culture of the civil society organizations that advance African affairs and the like. Thank you.
I think a part of Dr. Gnaka's answer can take place during his final remarks. I think he's going to sort of tie that all together. So he will answer that during his final remarks. And let's get to the young lady.
Okay, I just want to Take a brief announcement, if that's okay.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Linda Leaks, and I'm a 100-year-old Pan-Africanist.
All right.
And the announcement I want to make is tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock at the Ronald Reagan Building, there will be a white supremacist group meeting there who have said, I saw an interview, they said some horrible things about people of African descent. And there will be a major demonstration, so I just want to see if we can get as many people here as we possibly can, if you only can spend 30 minutes, but be there tomorrow when they're there to show, to be there, to let them know that we will not accept the statements that they're making about black people and preparing to inter us in concentration camps. So that's tomorrow at 5 o'clock at the Ronald Reagan Building. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and so as we ask our panelists to conclude our conference with their final remarks, I think in the interest of time and fairness, we'll start with Dr. Gnaka, and the last word will be had by Dr. Clark.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I want to thank you, for the opportunity. You came, you stayed, you listened to us, we shared some ideas. We will continue doing this until we find we can have a very important critical mass of people like-minded, and we have a vision of a novel vision of a novel articulation of Pan-Africanism in the 21st century as a common purpose. And then for Ubuntu, I think we can talk about that after the conference. Because we will be finishing. I want to give the opportunity to my friends who really did a wonderful job in talking, presenting, and also putting this conference together. So thank you.
It's unfortunate that capitalist industrial time always seems to cut these conversations and strategy sessions short. In terms of strategy, one of the things that comes out in my research on Los Hoyos as one of the first free black communities in the Americas is that their ability to create community was through systematic and intentional land transference and property transference and the maintenance of space. And this idea of symbolically claiming space, interacting with space, moving through space, and owning space, therefore land, has been at the epicenter of creating an African diaspora community of consciousness. I also live in West Baltimore, and in the community, next to the community in which the uprising occurred, there is an active and intentional and strategic movement amongst many people from the community to prevent gentrification, to prevent the replication of what happened here in DC, in West Baltimore, because it's happening and it's in process. There are communities and organizations that I'm happy to connect people with after the fact, because part of white supremacy is strategizing up to 2, 3, 4 generations ahead of time, so I can talk about those things outside the cameras in terms of connecting those who are working against that. But I think one of the main things in terms of strategy is learning from the past and learning from the histories that were obfuscated in terms of moving forward and being able to use those strategies that our ancestors have put forward that were prevented by countermeasures and put them into action, and I think the time is right now. So, thank you.
I wanted to say something on strategy too, and I think a lot of what you said.
Can we just kind of stop the movement? We're almost.
And I think one strategy for us, and I was trying to allude to it in the initial presentation, should be include building local power. Building power locally, which means, and it's not just an economic piece. I think in this country we tend to, and also maybe a European construct, separate economics and politics. You know, in fact, we can't really begin a lot of these projects or deal with these economic projects without exercising some power, which implies politics. That's the definition of it. And so we have to start local projects and that empower the communities in which they are in a very collectivized, socialist way, and also build transcontinental connections between these projects. These things cannot be. We also, one of the quote by Malcolm X, he said, "A chicken cannot lay a duck egg." And he said if a chicken could lay a duck egg, it would be one revolutionary chicken. And then what he says that to mean is that we cannot expect redress or usage from the machinations of imperialism. We can't get our liberation through those things that imperialism provides. It can only seek to either confuse us or give us some, keep us dependent on it as a structure. And so we have to really look at things, we have to be anti-imperialist, not just as a slogan, but in other words, independent, self-reliant in what we're doing. And so I'm saying that to say that we cannot, even when we talk about like civil society, all of this, there's a lot of U.S. money and other Western money going on to do a lot of things, even funding, quote-unquote, civil society to make sure it destabilizes countries. This is what goes on. This is a program through a whole host of U.S. agencies facilitating this program. So we have to be careful. You know, they entice us with things. I don't doubt that there's a whole lot of well-meaning, good-intentioned people that are working